My name is Alan Rosen. I'm 68 years old. I want to tell you about a storage unit in Boca Raton. Not a dramatic storage unit, not a storage unit with anything interesting in it. No mystery, no inheritance, nothing that makes a good story on its face. Just 12 by 12 feet of stuff I had been paying $57 a month to ignore for 9 years. I want you to do that math with me, because I did it one afternoon and it stopped me cold. $57 times 12 months times 9 years. That's $6,164. I paid $6,000 to a storage facility in Boca to avoid dealing with my own belongings. I'm a man who built a business from nothing, spent 30 years making decisions that involved real stakes, real money, real consequences. And I was quietly hemorrhaging $6,000 to a climate-controlled room I visited maybe twice because I couldn't face a bunch of boxes. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend I'm on a fixed income. I'm comfortable. That's not what this is about. But here's the thing. The money isn't the point. The money is just the number that made me stop and actually pay attention. What was in that unit was 30 years of who I thought I was. Sample cases from before the business got real. A desk from my first actual office, the one in Fort Lauderdale, the one with the broken air conditioning that I somehow still have affection for. Banker's boxes of files going back to the 90s, equipment nobody uses anymore. Things that weren't worth anything individually and somehow, collectively, felt like everything. Barbara had been telling me to deal with it for years, politely at first, then less politely, then with a particular kind of quiet that, in 41 years of marriage, I've learned to take seriously. I finally went. And what happened over the 4 months I spent going through that unit, piece by piece, decision by decision, changed something about how I feel about this retirement. I didn't expect that, not remotely. Here's the real fear. The one I didn't know I had until I was standing in that unit on a Tuesday morning with nowhere else to be. If I sell the things, the briefcase I carried through 30 years of deals, the sample cases from the early days when everything was still uncertain, the filing cabinet that moved with me through 3 different offices, then that version of my life disappears. Not just into storage, gone, sold, $40. Someone puts it in their car and drives away, and that chapter leaves with them. I know how that sounds. I'm 68 years old. I ran something real. And I'm telling you, I was quietly terrified of a filing cabinet. But this is the thing nobody says out loud about retirement. When you've been someone in a very specific way, built an identity that had weight and motion and purpose, and then you stop, the stuff becomes a substitute. You hold on to it because letting go feels like an admission, like you're filing a document that says that part is over. I wasn't ready to file that document. I'm not going to give you a system. I'm not going to tell you there are 5 steps to decluttering your retirement into happiness. That's not what happened to me, and I don't think it's what will happen to you. What I'm going to do is tell you what I found in that storage unit, what I sold, what I couldn't sell, who showed up, what I figured out along the way, and why I think the whole thing did more for my head and for this retirement than I had any right to expect going in. There's a briefcase, brown, leather, Italian. I bought it at a shop in Miami when I was maybe 39 years old. Something in the business had finally started working. The deals were real. The structure was real. Money was coming in with some consistency for the first time in my adult life. And I walked into a shop and bought a briefcase that cost more than my first car. I remember the exact weight of it. I remember walking out of that shop and thinking, okay, now you look like what you're becoming. I carried that briefcase for 20-something years, through flights and meetings and rooms where a lot depended on how steady you appeared. It came with me to a meeting in 1998 that I'm not going to describe in detail, but which changed the scale of everything, changed what was possible, changed what the next 10 years looked like. When I retired, I put it in the storage unit, didn't use it, didn't display it, didn't think about it consciously, just put it there. like I was keeping it safe, like I was preserving evidence of something. About 18 months into retirement, Barbara asked me, with that tone, to please deal with the unit. So I drove over there on a Tuesday. I opened the door. It smelled like sealed air and old paper. I found the briefcase in the back corner, on top of a box of files from 2004. I picked it up, and for about 2 full minutes I just stood there, holding it in a storage unit at 11 in the morning. No deal to get to, no one expecting me, nowhere to be. And I thought, who am I holding this for? That question, that one question. I hadn't been able to ask it before I was physically standing there with the thing in my hands. And once I asked it, I couldn't put it away again. That Tuesday was the beginning of something that took me 4 months to work through. And I think it was the most useful 4 months of this entire retirement. So I want to go through 4 things I noticed during those 4 months. Things that came from the actual process of going in there, pricing things, deciding what to sell, watching people come and take pieces of my past away in pickup trucks. They're not lessons, they're just observations. What I noticed, what I figured out. Some of it's about stuff. Some of it turned out to not be about stuff at all. The most embarrassing one first. I had equipment in that unit from a version of the business that hadn't existed in 15 years. A fax machine, 2 of them actually. One clearly the backup for the primary, both equally obsolete. A printer that I believe ran on Windows 98. A telephone system still in its original packaging, the kind with the oversized handsets and the blinking hold lights, the kind that belonged in a real office with a real receptionist and a receptionist desk to match. I had kept all of it for a decade. I put the whole lot on Facebook Marketplace. One listing, $40 for everything. The man who came to pick it up, perfectly nice, I have no complaints, spent more time loading his van than I spent creating the listing. He did not treat it like treasure. He treated it like what it was, a pile of outdated equipment that someone had finally gotten around to releasing into the world. I watched him drive away, and I stood there on the driveway, and I had to admit something to myself. I had held on to 2 fax machines for over a decade because some part of me had confused the tools with the work. Like the machines were proof. Like if I let them go, the deals wouldn't be real anymore. The years wouldn't be real. Like the evidence needed to be preserved somewhere, even if I never looked at it. Look, that's not rational. I know that. I built real things and I know they were real. They don't need a fax machine to remain true. My father used to say, and I heard this in various forms my whole life, that what you built lives in what it made possible, not in the receipts, not in the equipment, in what it enabled, in what it led to. I should have understood that without needing it demonstrated to me by a man with a minivan. I'm a little embarrassed that it took until I was 68 to get there, but here we are. The second thing is the one that actually made us real money. Money I didn't expect and didn't know was sitting there. Somewhere in that unit, buried in a box I almost didn't open, one of those boxes where you see the handwriting and think, I'll deal with that later, I found about 40 items from the early years. Things I'd accumulated from markets, from suppliers, from deals that had a physical component. Samples, one-offs, things that had come through my hands at various points and ended up in a box instead of anywhere useful. Some of it was junk. Most of it was moderately interesting. But some of it, I did not know this, had become actually valuable. I had an appraiser come look at it, a real one, recommended by someone whose judgment I trust. She went through the box carefully. She set aside a few pieces, and she told me that one of them, I'm deliberately not describing it because then everyone wants to know if they have one, and I don't want to run that errand, was worth somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000, sitting in a cardboard box, in a storage unit in Boca Raton, under a tarp, next to 2 fax machines. I'm a man who has not needed to calculate what $8,000 means to my monthly expenses in a long time. I want to be clear about that, but I want to be equally clear about what finding it felt like, because it didn't feel like a windfall. It felt like being handed back time, like I had accidentally stored something, forgotten about it, and now it was going to do something. We put it into an account for Eli, my grandson. He's 10 years old. He doesn't know it exists yet. He will. His name is Eli Engel, named partly after my father, which I'm not going to make a big thing of, but it means something to me that I'll leave at that. Knowing that money went there, that the box, the storage unit, the 9 years, the $57 a month all led to something sitting in an account with Eli's name on it, felt good. In a specific way that surprised me. It wasn't the amount, it was the directness of it. I found a thing. I understood what it was worth. I made a clear decision about where it should go. That simple sequence, for a man who'd been drifting more than he wanted to admit, felt like doing something real. Like being useful in a concrete way. I hadn't felt that in a while. I hadn't realized I missed it. The third thing is about a person, and I want to get this one right. About a month into the project, I posted the desk online, the Fort Lauderdale desk, the one from the first real office, solid wood, heavy, the kind of desk that announces something about how seriously you take yourself. I'd bought it at a warehouse sale in 1991 for $240, which at the time felt significant. A woman came to look at it, 32, 33 years old, I'm guessing. She was starting something, I could tell. She had that particular kind of energy, focused, slightly too formal, trying to project more certainty than she felt about a purchase she wasn't entirely sure she could afford. She looked at the desk for a long time. She ran her hand along the edge. She checked the drawers. And then she looked at me and said, "Is it sturdy? I need something that's going to last." And I said, "It's lasted 30 years so far." I charged her less than I'd planned to. I don't entirely understand why. Barbara would say it's because I'm a soft touch with a weakness for people who remind me of where I came from. She's probably right, she usually is. But here's what I noticed. When that desk left, when I watched her and her boyfriend wrestle it into the back of a pickup truck, tie it down, drive away, I didn't feel loss. I felt something close to the opposite. I felt like the desk had found its next use, like it was going back to work. I had been afraid of that moment. Not consciously. I hadn't sat down and thought, I am afraid to sell this desk. But somewhere in the 9 years of not dealing with it, I had been protecting myself from exactly that moment. And when it actually happened, it was fine, better than fine. And I stood in the driveway for a few minutes thinking about what that meant, about how much energy I'd spent dreading something that turned out to be, in the end, a woman with a pickup truck who needed a desk that would last. The fourth thing is the one I still don't fully understand. I kept some things, not everything. I let go of most of it. But some things I looked at and made a decision to keep. And when I tried to explain the logic to myself, I mostly couldn't. There's a notebook, a yellow legal pad from what I believe is 1993. I can tell from some of the dated entries, my handwriting, lists of names, numbers, plans sketched out and crossed out and rewritten, pages that show someone working something through. It's not a journal, it's not sentimental, it's just a working notebook from a particular stretch of months. I couldn't sell it. I tried to identify exactly why, and I got somewhere, but not all the way there. I brought it home. Barbara picked it up. She held it for a moment, didn't read it, just held it. And then she said, "This is the one where you figured it out, isn't it?" Not a question, a statement. She knew. She was right. That particular stretch of time, whatever was happening during those months, was when something shifted. When I stopped being a man who was trying to build something and started being a man who had actually built something. There's a difference. People who have crossed that line know what I mean. Barbara was there for all of it. She remembers that period clearly. She lived it too in her own way, waiting for me to figure out what I was doing. I don't know exactly what to do with the notebook now. It's in the drawer of the desk in my office. I don't open it regularly, but I know it's there. And I think some things aren't for selling, not because they have dollar value. The notebook has no dollar value to anyone but me, but because they're still doing something, still holding something in place, serving a purpose that isn't about money or memory or even sentiment exactly, something harder to name than any of those things. I don't know how to be more precise than that, but I think if you go through your own things, you'll know the difference when you're standing in front of it. It took me 4 months to clear out 12 by 12 feet. Barbara said that sounds about right for me. She didn't say it meanly. What I found in that unit wasn't really about the stuff. That's the thing I keep coming back to. The fax machines, the desk, the box with $8,000 in it, the notebook. None of it was actually about what it was. It was about what I was willing to look at and what I'd been avoiding. Going through it piece by piece, pricing things, watching people take parts of my past away, deciding what was worth keeping, turned out to be more useful than most of what I did in the first 18 months of this retirement. I feel lighter. I don't use that word often, but it's accurate. And we're saving $57 a month, which at this point I'm almost embarrassed to even mention. Look, I want to ask you something specific. If you've got a storage unit, a closed-off garage, a room with the door that nobody opens, tell me what's in it, not literally, but leave a comment. Tell me, what's the one thing you know you should probably deal with and haven't? Could be physical, could be something else entirely. I find those comments more useful than you'd expect, and I read them. Not every day, but I read them. Barbara and I have been talking about doing a follow-up to this, about the question of what you keep and why, how to think about that. We haven't filmed it yet. It might be a conversation between the two of us. She has more useful things to say about this than I do, and she knows it, and she's not shy about saying so. If you want to catch that when we do it, stick around. That's what we're here for. All right. Take care of yourselves.